Jesus eats the Passover meal with his disciples. Matthew 26, verse 17. On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus and asked him, "Where do you want us to get the Passover meal ready for you?"
"Go to a certain man in the city and tell him, 'The teacher says, my hour has come. My disciples and I will celebrate the Passover at your house.'"
The disciples did as Jesus had told them and prepared the Passover meal. When it was evening, Jesus and the 12 disciples sat down to eat. During the meal, Jesus said,
"I tell you, one of you will betray me."
The disciples were very upset and began to ask him one after another, "Surely, Lord, you don't mean me?"
"One who dips his bread in the dish with me will betray me. The Son of Man will die as the scriptures say he will. But how terrible for that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would have been better for that man if he'd never been born."
Judas the traitor spoke up, "Surely, teacher, you don't mean me?"
"Yes, it is you."
The Lord's Supper, Matthew 26, verse 26. While they were eating, Jesus took bread and gave thanks and broke it and gave it to his disciples.
"Take and eat it. This is my body."
Then he took the cup, gave thanks and offered it to them.
"Drink it, all of you. This is my blood, which seals God's covenant. My blood poured out for many, for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will never again drink this wine until the day I drink the new wine with you in my Father's kingdom."
When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Jesus predicts Peter's denial. Matthew 26, verse 31. Jesus said to his disciples,
"This very night all of you will run away and leave me, for the scripture says God will kill the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised to life, I will go to Galilee ahead of you."
Peter spoke up and said to Jesus, "I will never leave you, even though all the rest do."
"I tell you that before the cock crows tonight, you will say 3 times that you do not know me."
"I will never say that, even if I have to die with you." And all the disciples said the same thing. Jesus prays in Gethsemane. Matthew 26, verse 36. Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them,
"Sit here while I go over there and pray."
He took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee. Grief and anguish came over him.
"The sorrow in my heart is so great that it almost crushes me. Stay here and keep watch with me."
He went on a little further, threw himself face downwards on the ground and prayed,
"My Father, if it is possible, take this cup of suffering from me. Yet not what I want, but what you want."
Then he returned to the 3 disciples and found them asleep. And he said to Peter,
"How is it that you 3 were not able to keep watch with me even for 1 hour? Keep watch and pray that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak."
Once more Jesus went away and prayed,
"My Father, if this cup of suffering cannot be taken away unless I drink it, your will be done."
He returned once more and found the disciples asleep. They could not keep their eyes open. Again Jesus left them, went away, and prayed the 3rd time, saying the same words. Then he returned to the disciples.
"Are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be handed over to the power of sinful men. Get up, Let us go. Look, here is the man who is betraying me."
The arrest of Jesus. Matthew 26, verse 47. Jesus was still speaking when Judas, one of the disciples, arrived. With him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs and sent by the chief priests and the elders. The traitor had given the crowd a signal. "The man I kiss is the one you want. Arrest him." Judas went straight to Jesus and said, "Peace be with you, teacher." And he kissed him. Jesus answered,
"Be quick about it, friend."
Then they came up, arrested Jesus and held him tight. One of those who were with Jesus drew his sword and struck at the high priest's slave, cutting off his ear.
"Put your sword back in its place. All who take the sword will die by the sword. Don't you know that I could call on my Father for help, and at once he would send me more than 12 armies of angels? But in that case, how could the scriptures come true which say that this must happen?"
Then Jesus spoke to the crowd.
"Did you have to come with swords and clubs to capture me, as though I were an outlaw? Every day I sat down and taught in the temple, and you did not arrest me. But all this has happened in order to make what the prophets wrote in the scriptures come true."
Then all the disciples left him and ran away. Jesus before the council. Matthew 26, verse 57. Those who had arrested Jesus took him to the house of Caiaphas, the high priest, where the teachers of the law and the elders had gathered together. Peter followed from a distance, as far as the courtyard of the high priest's house. He went into the courtyard and sat down with the guards to see how it would all come out. The chief priests and the whole council tried to find some false evidence against Jesus to put him to death, but they could not find any, even though many people came forward and told lies about him. Finally, 2 men stepped up and said, "This man said, 'I am able to tear down God's temple,' and the other, 'and 3 days later build it up again.'" The high priest stood up and said to Jesus, "Have you no answer to give to this accusation against you?" But Jesus kept quiet. Again the high priest spoke to him. "In the name of the living God, I now put you on oath. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God."
"It is as you say. But I tell all of you, from this time on you will see the Son of Man sitting on the right of the Almighty and coming on the clouds of heaven."
At this the high priest tore his clothes and said, "Blasphemy! We don't need any more witnesses. You've just heard this blasphemy. What do you think?" One said, "He's guilty." Another, "He must die." Then they spat in his face and beat him, and those who slapped him said, "Prophesy for us, Messiah." Guess who hit you? Peter denies Jesus. Matthew 26, verse 69. Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard when one of the high priest's servant girls came to him and said, "You too were with Jesus of Galilee." But he denied it in front of them all. "I don't know what you're talking about." He went on out to the entrance of the courtyard. Another servant girl saw him and said to the men there, "He was with Jesus of Nazareth." Again Peter denied it. "I swear I don't know that man." After a little while the men standing there came to Peter. "Of course you're one of them. After all, the way you speak gives you away." Then Peter said, "I swear that I'm telling the truth. May God punish me if I am not. I do not know that man." Just then a cock crowed. And Peter remembered what Jesus had told him.
Before the cock crows, you will say 3 times that you do not know me.
He went out and wept bitterly.